to make this work. And we're not dragging our feet, as some people on voicemails have said to me. They've said, pass the law. We don't get a vote on the law. The public passed the initiative bypassed the legislature, that's the process, and goes right to the governor, and the governor signed it. So we had no vote, except our own as a private citizen, on whether that proposition passed or not. Now, the job of the legislature is to fund that proposition. And perhaps, and there are, I will be very upfront, there are conversations in the State House going on about possible legislation to protect taxpayers from a question that none of us know, and that is, what will the impact be of the financial responsibility of this state? Because all of our surrounding states predicted a certain number of people would sign up for Medicaid expansion, and almost every single state had double or triple the number of people come out to sign up than they expected. We are told that our numbers are better than those of the other states, that our research is better now because it's been longer, and so we'll see. But we don't know. It's a giant question mark. So we're going into this budget year, this budget setting process, with a giant question mark at the top of the page. And we can only estimate how much that will actually cost. Let me give you just a really brief overview. It is expected to cost $21 million out of the state general fund for the first 1/2 of the year, because it's estimated. We're not dragging our feet. I started to tell you that, as some people have asked me not to do, because the federal government takes a long time to approve the details that go into this expansion. So it's really in the Fed's hands right now, and it will take them, it is estimated that it will take them until January of 2020 for this to go into effect. At that point, we will be in the second half of our fiscal year in Idaho, which our fiscal year ends the end of June. So for that half of a year, it will cost the state an estimated, big question mark, estimated $21 million. The first full year after that will cost an approximate $42 million. And within 10 years, it is predicted that the cost factor will be $59 million a year. Those costs are estimates. It includes suspending the CAT fund, the Catastrophic Care Fund, and the Indigent Fund that help the counties deal with people who can't pay for their own health care costs. There are a lot of other places that the money will come from, that other programs that will need to change their budget in order to give some of their money back, because they'll be getting some benefits from the Medicaid expansion, such as corrections and those kinds of situations. But I won't go into detail, because we've got pages of numbers that we could rattle off, and you'd all be bored to death. However, $21 million for the first half year, $42 for the full year, and up to almost $60 million within 10 years. Those are the estimates. We have no idea what's really going to happen. So that's the information we have right now. We don't really have any more information than the financial estimates.
So I want to just comment a little bit on hers before I say what I wanted to say and why I wanted this question. And the money she's talking about is the 10% state share. That's 10% of the cost of the program, if the estimates are correct. There's been no state in the country whose estimates have been correct. Montana has 10% of their population on Medicaid expansion. If that were to happen in Idaho, that would take our estimates from 62,000 to 170,000, almost tripling the number of people on the program and tripling the budget. So that's a concern. But what I wanted to say is the voters in my district, Legislative District 2, did not support Medicaid expansion. And I intend entirely to follow the will of my voters in my district and do what I can to stop Medicaid expansion in the state of Minnesota.
There's a lot of discussion amongst our colleagues in Boise about this, and there is a side that just wants to sit back and wait to see what the Supreme Court does with the issue. There are some that just want to say we're going to give in and let's just do the quote-unquote will of the people. And then there are those of us that are taking a position of we have a lot of considerations before we can decide how we're going to vote on this particular issue. So for me, there's basically three issues. There's the law, first and foremost, which includes the Constitution. Now, we have a lawsuit that's been brought by one of our citizens that has raised some legitimate legal concerns, and we have to take those seriously. Now, we're going to wait to see what I will wait to see what the Supreme Court decides in that case, and I'll also be in the audience for that, before I can make a decision on the law part. But the two other factors are the proper role of government, which I promised my constituents when I was running that I would always adhere to that rule, that I wouldn't vote for anything that would be outside the scope of the proper role of government. And then third is the financial impact. And I agree with Senator Vick, we have no idea what this is going to cost. I, at this point in time, am committed to enforcing that rule of our republic. The will of the people is a majority. We are not a democracy, and we have a duty to obey the law first and foremost in our oaths. And until we know all those other factors, we are not properly in a position to do that. But right now, if we did it alone on the unknown cost factor, to me it would be a sufficient justification to vote against it. But I have serious concerns about this as far as its constitutionality. The lawyer that's drafted the pleadings in the case is a very good, very competent lawyer. He's done a great job in his arguments and his response briefs, and I encourage you to read those because that's an important consideration. So this is not going to go away anytime soon. It's going to be very emotional, but I also am going to follow the will of my voters, and at this point in time, we'll do what I can to make sure that this Medicaid expansion is not imposed. Now, one other thing I want people to keep in mind, when we talk about state money, only 10%, which Senator Vick discussed, where does the rest of this money come from? Well, people say, well, it's federal money. Well, the federal government has two ways to raise revenue. They can do it through taxation, they can do it through borrowing. Our current monetary system does not allow them to borrow. They create money out of thin air, which enlarges dramatically our national debt, which could lead to serious inflation or hyperinflation, and that's another intended consequence of this type of irresponsible spending program. So, hope that makes my position clear.
Anybody else? Jump into the fray? Why not? Everybody say goodbye to Senator Vick. He does have another meeting.
In the House, there again, my district, for FYI, voted also against expanding Medicaid. So I realize the will of the majority of people in the state voted. I opposed it personally for a variety of reasons and still do. I think it's a real concern. And there again, the financial aspect of this. When Senator Green mentioned earlier that we have a 5.2, 5.7, different people use different numbers, 5.2, 5.5 or something, 5.7%. 5.7% maintenance budget. What that actually means is that in order to maintain everything that the state has promised, like the career ladder, all of the different things we promised to fund, our budget, if we didn't do anything new, has to go up by 5.7%. A year or two ago, it was 3%. That's a direction that we need to be very cognizant of. We need to be very careful as we try. Everybody wants more services, but where does the money come from? It always comes down to the money. I mentioned the career ladder. I thought that might come up here, or not the career ladder, but the new school funding formula. And so there are winners and losers, but it's a spreadsheet, and you can put numbers in there, and then you can see what the impact of those numbers is. Well, yesterday, with the folks that were explaining this to us, they kept putting numbers in. If you get up to adding $280 million to the education budget, then there are only 2 schools that are losers. So money solves everything, but we don't have the money, and that's a simple fact. And in the House, we recognize there's nobody that I've spoken to that thinks this is gonna just be $40 million a year, 20 million for the first half year, as we've been told. Everybody believes it's gonna go much higher. We do have to try to find the money, and how do you do that? We wanna cut the tax on groceries, which makes sense to me. But there again, that's a cut. Where does the money come from? And we do have a limited budget. There's a pot of money. We have to try to figure out how to disperse that, and it's very difficult. So these are tough issues. This is going to be really difficult for the legislature. In the House, they've asked for members to give input into what they think would be adequate sideboards. And sideboards, I mean, and I don't know how you end a federal program once it starts, like Medicaid expansion, but some people say we'll put sideboards on that if the 90% currently that the federal government doesn't have any money, they just send checks and people cash them. But the 90%, if that ever goes down to where the state share will go up, then we would end the program. And a lot of people were saying that, but I do not know how you get rid of a program like this once it gets started. So there are a lot of concerns. I think at the end of the day, I have so many reasons why I didn't support it, but at the end of the day, I think it's the beginning of the end of good health care for this country. And this is applicable. It applies to a lot of things, but basically, you cannot equally distribute wealth, but you can equally distribute poverty. Now that works economically. Socialism doesn't work, never has worked, never will. And when you socialize your medicine, you do the same thing. You bring the common denominator down. And I think at the end of the day, this is going to be a disaster, but we'll do what we can.
I was not prepared to make this delivery today. I was thinking about it perhaps to deliver to the House floor or to one of the committees. And it will be part of my testimony in the Health and Welfare Committee. We act here in this country in many cases as if we're living in a vacuum. We refuse to look at what has happened in the rest of the world in similar situations. And it's a real tragedy. I think the great philosopher Santayana said, if you don't learn the histories of this, if you don't learn from history, you are doomed to repeat the errors of history. Many years ago, a niece of mine, or a cousin of mine, who is a medical doctor, came over and visited us from Poland. Now this was still while Poland was under communist rule. She and her husband were both medical doctors. They had a single bedroom flat, they had one child and one car between them. They both had to work part-time jobs to make ends meet. Okay, these are medical doctors. They came over here to this country, and we were living in Idaho, or in Utah at the time. We took them to the local department store, similar to a Target, Grand Central, if anybody's lived in Utah. They marveled looking down the aisles. They said, you have one aisle of toothpaste. In Poland, we have a shelf that has maybe got 3 tubes in it. You have an aisle of soap. We have this crummy soap in Poland that's wrapped in brown paper and lucky to get it. Now this is what we're headed towards with socialized medicine. You can trust the communists to be communists, socialists to be socialists. And I'm really sad that we're heading down the path that my native countrymen had to live through, and they're not out of it yet. It's taken 3 generations after communism has fallen for them to dig themselves out of the tragedy that they found themselves in by being forced to live under the communist rule. You have to realize that Karl Marx's promise that he was out to equalize the classes is absolutely true, but as my good seatmate mentioned, it's not to elevate the masses of the poor to the middle class or to the upper class, is to bring everybody down. So when you bring doctors down to the level of the janitor, you're in trouble. The only people that are going to go into the field of medicine are those who have a fantastic love of helping their fellow man and the love of the science of medicine. And that's where we're going with this Medicaid expansion. Now, I'm fortunate to have been able to influence our legislative district, District 3, which I share with Ron and Don Cheatham, our senator. We rejected the notion of Medicaid expansion, and I'm going to, by golly, support that will of my people in my district. Thank you.
Well, I'm in District 4, and District 4 approved Medicaid Medicaid expansion 58% to 42%. That's that reality. I will tell you that I'm a student of history, and I agree with most everything that has been said up here. I have studied how civilizations have risen. I have studied how civilizations have fallen. I believe that we have to look at history if we're going to have the tools necessary to predict it. Easy for me to say, to predict the future. So where are we? Okay, where are we? As Mary said, it's law. This is what we have right now, okay? I have received uncountable letters on people that are passionate about implementing Medicaid expansion as written, okay? I understand that, okay? I've also got countless letters of people that don't want to adopt Medicaid expansion as written, okay? I get that. Here's what I'm taking out of this. We probably have a percentage of people on each side of the issue that have read the bill to the word, and that's what they stand for, okay? I personally think that this election was, we need to do something about health care. That's the overwhelming message that got to me. Not specifically look at that comma or look at that, this, that, or the other. We need to do something about health care. And I think we do. I think we all agree that we do. Now, we're going to be arguing and arm wrestling about Medicaid expansion because it was passed with a passionate effort by some passionate people. That is law, that we have to do something. Personally, as John said up here, there's a lawsuit. There's a lawsuit that has a lot of people think a good chance of winning, okay, and that's going to change this issue dramatically. That's an item. There's a lawsuit in Texas right now that's going to go through the Supreme Court that can change this law dramatically. So, and again, I'm just restating an obvious, but we all need to know this. We also have a constitution that allows a process for a majority to rule. So we've got things coming from 57 different directions, okay? And I will agree with all of them, which makes me sound like a flip-flopper, but all I can tell you is I think people want to do something about health care. I personally think there are better ways to do something about health care than this Proposition 2 law. I think right now we're talking about who's paying for the health care. There are some economic impacts, but what we should be talking about is how do we make health care more affordable? How do we make health care work for our society and work within our free market system? So, what I'll tell you is that we got 2 lawsuits that we got to see how this is going to work out. And once we figure that out, we're going to have to find a way to reduce the cost of health care, let health care be sold across state lines. We're going to have to be looking at economic models and cultural models that will allow us to improve our healthcare system and not just say, government, you do it. Because I haven't seen a government program long-term that works. The energy department that President Nixon, I believe, set up, that was not supposed to last so long. And where are we now? How big is the energy department? There are better ways of dispensing health care than putting the government in the middle. It's a tough situation, but I believe we need to do something about health care. That's what I'll tell you.